Imara Solis pulled the leather portfolio from Ines Barlow's hands before the photographs were even finished. Not in a back hallway, not in a dim corner where cruelty could be dressed up as a misunderstanding, and carried out the door before witnesses could form an opinion. She did it in the center of Gallery West, beneath $400,000 worth of custom pendant lighting, while collectors, investors, design journalists, and champagne-holding guests watched Ines's humiliation become part of the evening's opening impression. Ines Barlow Ashwood, 37, the quiet, controlling owner of Barlow Design House and the wife of Nathan Ashwood, stood near the entrance arch with her hands cold and still at her sides. She wore a deep charcoal gown, no statement jewelry, nothing that announced itself. Against the room's elaborate performance of wealth, she looked like someone who had arrived to serve rather than to own. That was always the choice she made. Let the work speak. Let the room she had designed carry the conversation. Let no one know, until it was time for them to know exactly whose name was on the deed. What she carried that evening was not expensive by any standard the room could measure. A leather portfolio, hand-stitched along the spine, the leather worn soft from 30 years of being opened and closed. Her mother, Elspeth Barlow, had made it herself in the back office during the firm's first year of operation. A November night, a spool of waxed thread, 2 borrowed needles, and the particular focus of a woman who had run out of money, but not yet out of belief. Inside the portfolio were 43 original architectural sketches, drawn in graphite and pale blue ink, each one a founding idea for what would become Barlow Design House, a $500 million luxury interior design firm whose name Nathan's family had been using for months like a borrowed coat they had no intention of returning. To the guests, the portfolio looked old. To Imara, it looked like a proper plain woman carried, because she had nothing more impressive to hold. To Clifton Mace, 59, the public chairman of Barlow Design House, and the man who had protected Elspeth's legacy since her death 11 years ago, the moment Imara's hand moved toward that portfolio was the moment he reached for his phone. But that came later. First came the rest of it. Nathan Ashwood, 39, Ines's husband and the public-facing executive of Ashwood Capital, stood across the room with a cluster of investors when Ines arrived. He saw her through the crowd. His expression did not change, not with warmth, not with relief, not with anything that resembled the recognition one person owes another after 6 years of marriage. He looked at her the way a man looks at furniture, present, noted, and not particularly interesting. Cordelia Ashwood, 63, Nathan's mother and the self-appointed architect of the Ashwood family's social image, crossed the room with rehearsed warmth that had been practiced so long it had become indistinguishable from condescension. "Ins," she said. "Good, you made it. We were just discussing the partnership announcement." There was no partnership. There had never been a signed agreement between Ashwood Capital and Barlow Design House. There were emails. There was maneuvering. There was Nathan telling investors over private dinners that the Ashwoods had deep and formalized alignment with the firm, that an exclusive arrangement was being finalized, that his family would play a principal role in the firm's upcoming international expansion. All of it said without Ines's knowledge. All of it built on a name that had belonged to her mother first and to her second quietly, through a private trust that no one outside a small circle of attorneys and executives had ever been shown. Poppy Ashwood, 27, Nathan's younger sister and Cordelia's most reliable echo, appeared with a champagne flute and a phone and the cheerful disdain of someone who had decided years ago that being younger was the same as being more important. She looked at the portfolio and said, "You brought that old thing again." "Always," Ines said. Imara Solis arrived with Nathan's business circle. She was 32, a luxury brand consultant whose professional relationship with Nathan had evolved, over approximately 18 months, into something that required a different word. She moved through the room with the confidence of a woman who had already decided she belonged wherever she entered. She had a specific way of looking at Ines, not hostile, not competitive, but appraising, the way one looks at an object that has been placed in the wrong room. Morris Aldgate, 46, Nathan's investment broker, and the man who had been presenting Ashwood Capital's supposed alignment with Barlow Design House to private investors for 4 months, stood near the far installation wall with a leather folder under his arm and the satisfaction of a man who had confused access for authority. A gallery assistant approached Ines with a question about the archive display. She opened the portfolio to help him orient the framing. The sketches lay flat and perfect, 43 pages on cream paper, each one initialed in the lower right corner in her mother's careful hand. The founding vision of everything in this building, every room, every commission, every reputation the firm had earned in 30 years. Imara looked at the pages. Then she reached down and caught the top corner of the first sketch, the original blueprint for what would become Barlow's signature layered light concept. The idea that design publications had written about for 2 decades and pulled it loose from its sleeve. The sound was small, a soft separation, the kind of sound that only registers if you know what it means. Don't! Innes's voice was quiet and absolute. Imara held the page up toward the installation wall. The photographer needs something clean. This can be reprinted. That cannot be reprinted. Imara looked back with the smile of someone who had mistaken restraint for permission. It's a working copy, isn't it? You wouldn't bring the originals to a public event. She leaned the page against the display wall as if she had made a decision on everyone's behalf. Clifton was already moving, not running, moving the way experienced people move when the moment has passed the point of prevention and entered the territory of documentation. He reached for Dara Wells, 41, the firm's head of archive security, who had been managing the evening's artifact handling from a quiet position near the secondary entrance. He said 4 words into her ear. Dara pulled out her phone. Imara turned back to the portfolio on the table. Her hand moved again, to the second sketch this time. Ines reached forward, their hands crossed in the space above the page. The paper tore along the centerfold, not cleanly, not in a way that a conservator's skill could ever fully erase. The room went quiet in the uneven way it does when something real has happened inside a setting designed for performance. Cordelia raised her glass from across the space. Her expression was not alarmed. It was composed. It was the particular look of a woman who had prepared herself to be embarrassed by her daughter-in-law and was grateful for a concrete reason. Nathan stood still. Poppy looked at the torn sketch the way someone looks at a social inconvenience. Unfortunate, clearly not her problem. Ines knelt and picked up the piece that had fallen to the floor. She held it against her palm. A diagonal line of graphite, a corner of her mother's handwriting, the letter E half visible, where Elspeth had initialed the sketch in the autumn of 1991, the year the firm's first commission had been awarded. A 2-bedroom apartment in Philadelphia, 3,000 square feet. The client had cried when she walked through the finished rooms. 1991. The Ashwood family had not entered Elspeth's orbit until 2017. Ines rose. She looked at Imara and said nothing theatrical, nothing designed for the room. She said only, "You have no idea what you just touched." Imara's chin lifted slightly. It's provenance. Ines's eyes moved once to Nathan. He looked at the wall, and now it has witnesses. She closed the portfolio around what remained. She did not raise her voice. She did not make a scene that would give anyone permission to call her unstable. She walked toward Clifton, placed her hand briefly on his arm, and said 2 words that the room could not hear. Clifton's jaw tightened. He turned to Dara, who was already moving toward the display wall to retrieve the first sketch before anyone could touch it again. Ines walked out through the side entrance. The rain outside was cold and certain. She stood in it for a moment with the portfolio held against her chest. Her mother had stitched that leather in a borrowed office on a November night, while a 3-year-old Ines slept on a pile of fabric samples in the corner. When Elspeth had finished, she had held it up in the lamplight and said, "This is where we keep the beginning, so we never forget that we had one." 3 decades later, a woman who did not know what she had touched had torn the beginning in half. And the man who had promised to hold Ines's history with care had watched it happen without moving a single muscle in her direction. She took one breath, then she called Vera Kincaid. Vera Kincaid, 54, had administered the Barlow Trust since Elspeth's death, and had the particular calm of someone who had been waiting for this call without knowing exactly when it would come. "How bad?" she asked. "Physical damage to 2 original sketches," Ines said. "Witnessed. I have the gallery's camera positions." A pause. "Are you ready?" Ines looked at the torn edge of paper above the portfolio's rim. "I have been for a long time." Inside, the evening continued. Cordelia moved through the room with renewed confidence, performing acts. Morris presented his folder to investors near the main installation. Nathan accepted handshakes and impressed looks with the ease of a man who had confused proximity for authorship. Poppy posted photographs with a caption that read, "Some families build legacies. Some families know how to recognize one." Ines was not in any of the photographs. That was Poppy's choice. That was what Nathan permitted. And for the first time in 6 years of careful, considered silence, Ines allowed herself to feel the full and exact weight of what she had been carrying alone, not with anger, but with the clear-eyed recognition that comes when you stop arguing with evidence. She was not angry only about the portfolio. She was angry that she had told herself, year after year, that the marriage would correct itself, that Nathan's distance was stress, not character, that Cordelia's coldness was insecurity rather than contempt. She had protected them from the consequences of their own behavior the same way she had protected the firm, quietly, completely, without ever asking for acknowledgement. She had also, without their knowledge, signed the anonymous letter of credit that saved Nathan's first investment vehicle from complete collapse 4 years ago. She had cleared a private medical debt Cordelia had accumulated after a hospitalization she never told her son about. She had arranged a quiet settlement when Poppy's reckless behavior at a charity event brought a defamation claim from a former collaborator. All of it paid through the trust. None of them had ever asked where the relief came from. None of them had looked closely enough at the paperwork to wonder. The offices of Kincaid and Mace were lit well past midnight. Vera spread the case across the long table, gallery footage from 4 angles, a timestamp sequence showing Amara's hands on the portfolio, witness statements from guests who had been standing within 10 feet, and a message from Dara, confirming that the first sketch had been retrieved and sealed in an evidence sleeve before it could be moved again. Morris's investor materials were there as well. 4 prospective clients had forwarded them to the firm's general inbox after the gallery opening, seeking confirmation of the partnership authority that had been described. The materials called it a formalized exclusive alignment. One page suggested Nathan Ashwood was expected to play a principal advisory role in Barlow's next international phase. Another carried language close enough to an internal firm document that Vera had already flagged it for the fraud review. Physical damage to registered cultural property, Vera said. The sketches were documented with the State Archive Review Board the year after your mother's death. The provenance record is complete. This is not only a civil matter. Ina stood at the window with her arms crossed. The city was quiet at this hour, in the way cities are only quiet when something serious has been decided. Clifton arrived and set a sealed case on the table without speaking. Both sketches had been recovered. The first had minor handling damage. The second had a full tear through the center fold. The paper can be stabilized, Clifton said, but the tear will be permanently visible under examination. Enos turned from the window. Let it be visible. He looked at her. You don't want it restored completely. I want it preserved exactly as it is. She paused. Let the damage testify. The Design Excellence Awards were 3 weeks away. Barlow Design House had been nominated in 4 categories. The awards board had requested that the firm's principal owner attend for the keynote presentation. Ines had known for 6 months. She had also known for 3 weeks that Morris had contacted the awards program coordinator to request that Ashwood Capital be listed as a presenting partner, a request that Clifton had quietly declined without explanation. Send the Ashwoods front row seats, Ines said. List them as guests and public supporters, exactly what they are. Vera looked up. If they use that seating to imply authority they don't have, Ines continued, the record will show what they were told and what they chose to claim. We are not constructing anything. We are simply keeping the lights on while they build the case themselves. Nathan's message arrived at 1:44 in the morning. You disappeared and embarrassed us in front of the only people who matter tonight. I hope you understand what that cost. No question about the sketches, no acknowledgement of what had been torn in a room full of witnesses, no name for what Imara had done. Only blame, arriving in 11 words after the longest silence of their marriage. Ines set the phone face down. She signed the investigation authorization. She signed the archive damage filing. She signed the document authorizing Vera's office to begin a formal review of Ashwood Capital's investor communications. Then she asked Vera what was in the final folder, the one that had not been opened. Records, Vera said carefully, of every financial action the trust has taken on behalf of the Ashwood family. Ines already knew the figures. What she had not known was how different it would feel to see them arranged as evidence rather than as love. Use them only if they deny what I did, she said. Vera's voice softened. You still want to protect the person you were when you gave those things. Yes, Ines said, because that person was real. Whatever he became, she was real. 3 weeks moved in 2 separate worlds. In Nathan's world, the front row invitation confirmed everything he needed to believe. Morris photographed the card and sent it to 6 investors before noon the day it arrived. Cordelia told her donor circle that the awards were essentially a Barlow Ashwood event. Poppy prepared a caption. Imara chose a copper dress and planned to sit close enough to Nathan that the cameras would draw their own conclusions. In Ines's world, the work continued. She arrived at the firm before the staff most mornings. She reviewed the archive installation. She sat in quiet rooms with Clifton and said very little. because Clifton had known her since she was 12 years old, sitting on a workbench while Elspeth talked through a client problem, and sometimes quiet between two people who have known each other that long is its own kind of communication. She would have done it exactly this way, Clifton said one morning. Ines looked up from the installation diagram.
Your mother?
Not because it was strategic, because she genuinely could not bring herself to become the thing that had hurt her. The awards hall held 340 guests. The room was the kind of room where Nathan's name had always felt significant when he stood near its edges, and where tonight he sat near the front with the certainty that significance was finally preparing to arrive in full. 4 award presentations opened the evening. Barlow Design House won 2. Each time a member of the design team went to the stage. Each time Nathan smiled as though the applause was reaching him directly. Then the host returned to the podium. Before our closing award, she said, Barlow Design House will present 2 restored artifacts from the Elspeth Barlow Legacy Archive, the firm's complete founding collection, shown publicly here for the first time since the firm's 25th anniversary. The presentation will be made by the firm's controlling owner. Nathan leaned toward Morris. Which board member? Morris said, probably Mace. Clifton walked to the stage. He stood at the microphone with the still certainty of a man who had been waiting 11 years for a single sentence. Barlow Design House is honored to present the Elspeth Barlow Legacy Archive, he said. The presentation will be made by the firm's controlling owner and sole trustee, Ines Elspeth Barlow Ashwood. The room shifted the way rooms shift when something that has been true for a long time is finally said aloud in front of everyone. Ines came from the left wing into the full light. She wore the same charcoal gown she always wore. Around her throat hung a single pendant, a small gold drafting compass on a thin chain, the one her mother had worn to every client presentation for 30 years. Repaired, polished, worn now for the first time since the funeral. The archive display stood to her left. Both sketches were mounted, including the second, with the tier preserved under archival glass, visible at 10 feet to anyone who looked. Cordelia's face went the color of old plaster. Nathan gripped the armrest of his chair. Poppy's phone slipped from her hand. Imara's mouth opened and made no sound. Ines did not look at them first. She looked at the room. That was the detail none of them had prepared for, that she did not look at them first. My mother drew the first line of this firm when she was 29 years old, she said. She had no investor, no board, no partner. She had a drafting table, a rented office, and a leather portfolio she stitched herself the night she ran out of money to hire anyone else to make it. Her hand moved briefly toward the archive case. 43 sketches, everyone initialed, everyone dated, the complete founding vision of everything this firm became. The large screen behind her showed the portfolio open, the sketches fanned across velvet. Then it shifted to the second sketch sealed under glass. The tear ran straight down the centerfold, clean and undeniable. 3 weeks ago, Ines said, 2 of these sketches were damaged at a public event by a guest who believed they were decorative copies. She believed this because the woman carrying them wore a plain gown and an old leather binder, and so could not possibly be the person who owned the room. The image remained, the tear remained. The damage cannot be reversed, she said. We chose not to hide it. We chose to preserve it, because the truth that can be seen is harder to deny than the truth that has only been heard. Vera stepped from the wing and set a sealed folder on the table. Clifton moved to the second microphone. For the record, Clifton said, Barlow Design House has not authorized any partnership, investment alignment, expansion arrangement, or advisory role for Ashwood Capital or any of its representatives. The firm has initiated a formal review of investor communications conducted by third parties using Barlow's name without authorization. All claims of Ashwood-Barlow partnership are factually inaccurate. All negotiations involving Ashwood intermediaries are suspended immediately, pending legal review. He did not raise his voice. He did not name names beyond what the filing required. That restraint made it worse. Morris's phone began buzzing before Clifton reached the second sentence. Investor names on the screen. One message, then another. Nathan rose from his seat. A member of the event staff appeared at the end of the row, not confrontational, simply present. The cameras were still on. The room was watching. For the first time all evening, Ines looked directly at her husband. Her expression was not angry. That was the thing that would stay with the people who watched it. She was not angry. She was finished. I did not come here to embarrass you, she said. I came here to stop protecting you. The applause started at the back of the hall, then the center, then everywhere, in the long rolling kind. That means a room has understood something. In the corridor afterward, Nathan found her. He had walked because there was nowhere else left to stand. "You should have told me who you were," he said. It was not an apology. It was the complaint of a man grieving his own lost access. Ines looked at him steadily. "I did," she said. "Across 6 years of mornings when you chose not to ask, I told you in every way that mattered. You only wanted the version that would benefit you." Vera appeared at the far end of the corridor. The process server was beside her, holding a sealed envelope that weighed exactly as much as a decision that had already been made. Nathan stared at the envelope in his hand after the server walked away. The weight of paper is underestimated by people who have never had the truth delivered to them in a formal document. "I built something," he said, "and there was something genuine and fractured inside it. I thought we were doing it together." Ines was quiet for a moment. "You were building with my mother's tools," she said, "with my name and my silence and my patience and my money. When you can tell me which part of that belonged to you, I'll know what we built." She walked back toward the hall. The design team was gathered near the archive display. Dara was there, and Clifton and Sorrel Andrade, 24, a junior archivist 6 months into her position, who did not yet know that the woman who had approved her hire was also the woman whose signature appeared on the firm's founding trust documents filed the year before Sorrel was born. The archive would remain on display for the full 3-day exhibition. The torn sketch would stay under glass, visible, documented, preserved in its damage, because beauty that has survived harm carries a different kind of authority than beauty that has never been tested. The charitable initiative the firm announced that evening would be funded through the awards trust in Elspeth's name. Design and architecture mentorship grants for women beginning their careers without institutional backing, without family connections, without anyone in a position of power who had decided in advance that they belonged in the room. Imara did not follow Nathan into the corridor. She sat in the hall with her copper dress catching the light and no one beside her. The investors she had charmed on Nathan's behalf were composing careful messages about reviewing their positions. Poppy had deleted her caption. Cordelia had stopped trying to reach anyone by phone. The fall was not dramatic or sudden. It was the quieter kind, door by door, name by name, call by unanswered call, the kind that cannot be reversed by a press statement or a story told differently. Before sunrise, Ines returned to the firm alone. She stood in the archive reading room she had designed 12 years ago, the room with the north-facing windows her mother had always said gave the most honest light, because it never shifted with the hour. The drafting compass rested at her throat. The torn sketch hung under glass on the far wall, the first installation in the new permanent display. She had not worn the pendant since Elspeth's funeral. She had kept it sealed in the archive with the rest of the founding collection because, in the 11 years since her mother's death, she had not been certain she was ready to be seen as what she was. Now she wore it, not because she had won something, not because they had lost something, but because the thing she had spent 11 years protecting had survived all of it. The silence, the marriage, the torn pages, the long patience, and survival, real survival, deserved to be worn in the light. Some rooms belong to the loudest person in them, and some rooms belong to the person who built them. And sometimes the quietest woman in the space is not quiet because she has nothing to say. She is quiet because she already knows how the story ends, and she is giving everyone else the chance to understand it before she has to show them. They finally understood.